So the the book talked about the kids going up to the spruce trees and chewing gum. Now there are a number of plants whose sap forms resin, which is this thick, thick sort of rubbery substance. And actually, rubber is a type of resin from the rubber tree. And there are gum trees that make a resin called gum. And, so you have the gum trees. But chewing resin is a very common thing. I mean, it's whole cultures all over the planet do it. In Europe, especially around the Mediterranean, it's chewing mastic, and mastic comes from the Greek word for chewing. Um, the Mayans chewed chicle, which is the sap of another tree. And if you're to take a look at gum, there's a brand of gum called chiclets, which are little pieces of chicle. Modern chewing gum, of course, has a lot of sugar in it. But these were just normal plant resins, which are, as I said, thick saps that people would go and chew. And it's something to chew, it's something to work the jaw, which, is better than eating. And, it's easier to do than eating because, you have to go out and find food. But, if you just walk up to a bit of tree and take a bit of the resinous sap and you can just chew it. And, this is a fairly common thing. Don't go chewing bits of resin from trees because most of them will taste nasty and they can stick to your teeth. But anyway, it was a common thing back in the day. And yeah, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stuff in this chapter and a whole bunch of fun stuff with Anne losing her temper. Losing her temper is a bad thing, but she realizes it. And Mrs. Rachel Lynde backs up Anne for once, and that's kind of surprising. And all the kids were backing up Anne because Mr. Phillips was like singling out Anne for something, and she wasn't the last one in, and he wanted to punish somebody, and so he's like, okay, we'll pick on the last girl, which is wrong. We'll pick on the new kid, wrong. We'll pick on the redhead, wrong. He if he was going to start punishing, it would be like, okay, everybody who wasn't seated when I put up my hat gets punished. And so here you have Anne, who is like not even the next to last. I mean, she was just in the middle. She was the last of the girls, beat some of the boys. And so, just picking her was just completely wrong, and everyone did it. And she was in a fury, and she talked about iron in her soul, which is a great turn of phrase. And because, your soul, your will, and iron is long considered one of the most durable substances. And, it's iron. It's just like strong and resolute and unmoving and unyielding. And so Anne had iron in her soul. And she's like, no. And Mrs. Rachel Lynde was like, okay, just let her go. She won't miss much. The teacher sucks. And she'll come around. And she also pointed out that if you force Anne, she's just going to continue to sabotage things and sabotage things. And the chapter ends with her Anne crying because she misses Diana because they only get a little bit of time in the evenings, and there isn't going to be much of that because it's getting dark and it's getting to be winter. And Prince Edward Island is like way, way north. And because it's way north, the winters have very, very short days. So there's only a little bit of sunlight. So Anne is missing Diana. And then she starts fantasizing that, oh, Diana's going to leave her, that Diana's going to get married. And she saw Diana talking some with Gilbert Blythe, so it's like, oh, Diana's going to marry the person that I absolutely hate, and I'm going to be standing next to her as a bridesmaid, and then she's going to leave me forever. And Marilla breaks down laughing, because this is the silliest thing Marilla's ever heard. She just loses it because, it's just the absurdity. So here you have Anne, who's like 10, 12, something like, Anne's young. And she's worried about something that won't happen for another 10 years, if at all. And so Marilla's like, Anne, if you're going to borrow trouble, get something closer. And, this is one of those things that I say, there are things that you have to worry about and things that, are just so far remote that you don't have to worry about. And here you have Anne picking the most remotest thing. It's like, the only way it could be more absurd is if she's like, oh no, when Diana dies, we're going to be buried 10 feet apart because we can't get adjoining plots because her family will want to be buried around her. And it's like, this is silliness. But, Anne does a lot of silly, silly things.